Good evening and welcome to Bridgecast. We're super happy that you're here with us. I'm here with Kieron and Kessler, and they are one of our exchange team members for the upcoming year of 2021. So Kieron originally got selected as one of the exchange program members for this year, but because of COVID-19, we are extending that up to next year. And so as communicated with our community, we have extended all of those exception for applications to next year. So Kieron will have extra time to be prepping as an exchange team member, but I promise that they are well on their way to being very well equipped and knowledgeable on the subjects that we discuss at Bridge Builders STL, which is why we have them here with us on Bridgecast. Kieron has a very in-depth perspective on the current movement of Black Lives Matter and how we as a community can interact with the movement itself. We're going to talk a little bit today over the intersection of colonialism and imperialism and see how that interacts with an indigenous community and in connection with the Black Lives Matter movement. But before we go on to that, we have a raffle that we said that we were going to pick out for the Rolling Ridge. One quick notice that one of the things that I think is really exciting and I've been spending some of my time with is pollinator gardens. So quick shout out to pollinator gardens and spending some time at Rolling Ridge. So even if you don't win this gift certificate, I encourage you to go out and get some plants. There's bee balm, milkweed, and plenty of other Missouri natural prairies plants that you can plant in your garden and get really great pollinators out of. So here's the Rolling Ridge certificate, and we have a couple in there. I'm going to pick them out now. And the winner is Michelle Hossmeyer. Thank you, Michelle, for donating, and thank you to Rolling Ridge for donating us this certificate. For next 2 weeks, from 2 weeks from now, we will be pulling a raffle for this jewelry given to us from local artists on the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Reservation. Sorry, Kieran, I blocked your head there for a second. These were made by Kayla Howe and given to us by Bree Black, who's the volunteer outreach coordinator at the Sioux Y. These were handmade by Lakota artists, and one of the things the Sioux YMCA does is sell art from local Native artists to continue to give back to the community. So we bought these from Bridge Builders from the Sioux Y, which is then given to the artist, and now any of the proceeds that you donate for $5 per raffle ticket to win these beautiful handmade jewelry will be given directly to the exchange program for 2021. So people like Kieron and the other exchange team members, both from St. Louis and Dupree, were raising money to continue to send them on the program. So on our website, we'll have that up at the end of the day today. It's $5 per entry, and thank you again to everyone else who's been participating in that. Okay, I'm going to be done talking about logistics stuff, and we're going to go into Kieron. Kieron, I'm so happy you're here with us. I'm so happy that you're able, to talk on this subject, because I think it is something that I'm so excited to hear more from you about. Can you first give us a little intro about yourself, how you got involved with the organization, more stuff so people on the other side of the phone can know who you are?
Well, my name is Kieron, and I'm an international human rights student at Webster University, and I'm also double minoring in journalism and women and gender studies. So I have my foot in a couple of places. I am personally more interested in a lot of decolonization authors and the functions of decolonization and how it works for both indigenous communities and brown communities and even Black communities. And I'm particularly interested in this because my mom's side of the family is actually from Punjab, India. So I was raised a majority of my life learning about what the partition meant for post-colonial India, learning about what the decolonization process looked like. And it's also given me a little bit more of an attachment to activism. My culture is very based in morality. My mom's side is has been very good at instilling in what is right and what is wrong. My dad's side does the same thing, but it's a cultural aspect. I feel like, especially when it comes to the topic of Black Lives Matter, I feel as someone whose family is Sikh, who identifies with the Punjabi culture, I don't know how I could not talk about these topics when my my heritage is also witnessed like state-sanctioned violence when it comes to our people.
Yeah.
So thus I have a little bit more of a say when it comes to a lot of social movements, and because I have a little bit more of a focus on social morality and things like that. So yeah, that's me.
And me and Kieron met in our Indigenous Human Rights class, Indigenous Film class with Dr. Kingston. And I'm so excited that you're coming on the trip with us next year.
I'm super excited too. It's going to be a blast.
It is going to be a blast, for sure.
Yeah.
We wanted to talk a little bit about colonialism, how it crossed over with imperialism. And as you said before, one of your focuses within the Human Rights Program and one of your interests that is very prevalent in going through a class with you is colonialism and decolonization within our current society. For the individuals watching, could you define sort of what you're talking about when you say colonialism or when you talk about imperialism and what that means as a concept as a whole for you?
I know imperialism is that where colonialism being function as two sort of separate structures. Imperialism is more of the policy that goes behind the move to foreign lands to instill different values based on military force and diplomacy in order to use another area for the homeland's bidding almost. And then whereas settler colonialism kind of comes with like this goal of when you go to a new area and you set up colonies, it's basically supposed to be replacing the current population with a new form of settlers, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Which is why a lot of indigenous communities are very heavy in speaking out against settler colonialism.
And thank you for that definition. And how you mentioned at the end how an indigenous community connects with this idea of colonialism, of course, and our connection with the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Reservation as an organization. A lot of indigenous activism has sort of been a part of what we are pushing out to our community. Because we believe that it's incredibly important, and a lot of times it's sort of put on the back burner. But right now we are in the midst of a change movement, of the Black Lives Matter movement having some, you were talking to me earlier today how it's one of the largest spread civil rights movement, if not the most largest spread in the entire world. And I think you have a very interesting theory on how indigenous rights activists are sort of being heavily participating in the Black Lives Matter movement. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, for sure. And before I talk about the Black Lives Matter, I want to make it clear to our viewers that I'm not Black and nor am I indigenous, so I would fit, or I'm Indian, but I'm not the native, typical indigenous person from North America or South America. So I do think it's important for me to acknowledge that my job is more of as a segue for information, rather than the end-all be-all point of information when it comes to looking at the movement. I'm functioning as a way to spread more information, and towards the end I will give you all some resources to sort of further your interest if you're interested in learning about the functions of Black Lives Matter and get the first-person perspective of the Black experience, because obviously I cannot get that to you. But when it comes to decolonization and the way that the Black Lives Matter movement sort of functions, I found it quite interesting just from my knowledge of what decolonization sort of looked like in India and how it looked like when it came to Africa and separate countries in Africa gaining liberation, and this concept of rejecting the colonial state. For example, when Gandhi was moving towards decolonization, he asked other Indians to sort of drop these sort of materialistic possessions that are resemblant of the state, of the colonial state. And I feel like in a way when it comes to that same sort of rejection of the colonial state, you're coming into the concept of ownership, right? They want to maintain ownership of their own area, their own land, their own person. And when it comes to Black Lives Matter, that concept of ownership is very much seen, because right now, Black folks do not have ownership of their own bodies when it comes to the way the state inherently functions, when it comes to hyper-policing in their communities, and when it comes to the lack of control of their own communities. The Black Lives Matter movement is wanting to reclaim the ownership, an aspect of like the call for defunding police is just an instance of how this movement is inherently rejecting this colonial structure, because the justice system is one of the most prevalent systems of the colonial structure that is kind of there, that a lot of us encounter a lot. Yeah. And so to sort of call for a defunding of that prevalent part of the colonialist structure is a way of them being able to reject it. And then in a sense, Black liberation comes from ownership of their own bodies. Mm-hmm. So when the state doesn't necessarily own their own bodies anymore, the call for Black liberation is through their own ownership, their reclaiming of themselves and their communities.
Thank you.
Kwame Ture, actually in the book Black Power, he basically talks a lot about that the concept of what Black liberation truly means and what the coalitions necessarily mean, and the understanding of the difference in economic structures, and that's very important to realize before people who are not Black are able to analyze the way these structures have worked against Black folks and Indigenous folks for a long time.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting the theories that you have built upon ownership, and one of the things that I know I have discussed within some of my classes with Kate Parsons, who you mentioned earlier, is how ownership affects the land, how it affects environmental ethics, how it affects a larger idea on intersections between environmental racism and ecofeminism. For you, in sort of your actions and experience within activist circles in St. Louis right now, why do you believe that there is a heavy participation of the Indigenous community with the Black Lives Matter community right now?
Well, because Indigenous communities have been having already issues with the justice system as well for a long time. You can look at the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls activism itself, just as an example of like how Indigenous communities are expressing distaste and anger for the lack of response that their justice systems are having in their areas, which is resulting in a amount of cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women to either be dropped or to not be looked into, or even in some cases, police officers don't show up until 24 hours after the call had been made. So Indigenous communities have already had this issue when it comes to the justice system and equal representation of them and their women in their community. And it's very much a similar sort of structure in the sense that Black folks have also historically had this issue when it comes to the police. Like the book, The New Jim Crow, that I actually read in the Black Lives Matter class at Webster, actually goes into the background of how this justice system has been sort of built to sort of negate any sort of Black mobility, if that makes sense. She talks about how the origins of police departments in areas come from the tactics of slave bounty hunters, which is just an example of this sort of attachment that to anti-Black sentiment that the justice system has had, that's been rooted in since the beginning. So it's very interesting to see how both communities sort of have found their own areas of distaste for the justice system and the way the justice system has been when it comes to responding to these communities and their cries for help and their suggestions on fixing their areas. So thus, you see, especially like I went to a protest last week, and I was able to see an Indigenous person created a bead diamond to show support with the Black Lives Matter community, which is just an example of how we're seeing Indigenous folks sort of align themselves with Black Lives Matter because this is how coalitions are sort of made. They're created through this mutual understanding that the justice system is and has historically been anti-Black and anti-Indigenous, which again, Charles B. Hamilton also goes into detail when it comes to Black power. He talks about the aspect of coalitions and how a proper coalition is supposed to be formed and what our role as non-Black folks are when it comes to engaging with what Black communities need, not what we think they need.
Yes. And on that topic of how our communities can engage more, one of the things that I know is prevalent right now within non-Black communities is how can we help, right? And there is, a very difficult line that's crossed, and one of the biggest things that I have heard some of my Black colleagues offer is do your own research, right? And one of the best things that I think is about this interview you're about to provide is that you're about to provide us with the best resources and knowledge in this current situation. So books that individuals can read and other ways that we can get involved as well. On the idea of activism, can you talk to us a little bit, Kieron, about different ways we can participate in activism for the Black Lives Matter movement and for our communities as a whole?
Yes, for sure. There's many ways, especially now during the pandemic, that are instrumental more so than they would normally be. For example, social media is a huge factor into getting these videos, the awareness out there through a very well-used platform. It's also a mode for immunocompromised folks and folks who are living with immunocompromised or people who are old age or just people who are at risk for COVID-19 to be able to act on their own, to be able to do some sort of activism from the comfort of their own home. So social media definitely offers a place for that. When it comes to people who are capable and able-bodied and willing to go out to protest, I always recommend that you take the safe precautions, never instigate violence, and always listen to the leaders of the movement. Do not take the voice away from the leaders, because our job as people who are not Black, our job is to be able to lift these voices up who have not been previously been able to be heard. So our job is not to speak; it is inherently to lift up and help put these voices on a pedestal to where the world can listen to them, and that's what we need, right? So I always suggest you go to protest training, and also when you go to protest, always wear masks, bring Germ-Vax consistently, make sure you're keeping your hands clean, and I also suggest my best friend from St. Louis here, Kieron mentioned one thing that I thought was very instrumental to what activism should really look like for folks who cannot leave their house at the moment. He said that having uncomfortable conversations is one of the best form of activism that you can have. Having those uncomfortable conversations with your family, with your friends, to sort of talk about these issues that haven't been talked about before. That's what we need. We need to have these discussions, and if they're uncomfortable, we probably should be having them in the first place, which I will credit Kieron to that one, because that was a great quote. I was like, yes. I'm very much for everyone who is trying to find their place in activism, just realize that there are so many different ways. There's strategy-based activism, there's social media-based activism, there's on-the-ground, boots-on-the-ground activism, like going out and protesting. There's so many different forms of activism that you don't have to be limited to one version of activism. And so you're able to find which part of activism just works better for you. And go with that.
You froze up a little bit there, but we got the majority of your message, Kieron.
Awesome.
We did. And just at the end, one of the things that I did want to reiterate on, in case you froze up during it, the comment from Kieron is to have those difficult conversations. So not to take away the words from Kieron or from Kieron, but just because Kieron froze up there for a second, I was reiterating that. But you also have this really cool collection of books that you are going to share with us as well. And so in addition to the resources, you also brought some knowledge with you as well.
Yes, and before I show you some books, I did want to let you all know the Bail Project is still taking up donations for helping bail out peaceful protesters. So that might be a good website to go donate to if you all are in the mood for donating. I do have some books that I highly recommend. They're all written by Black authors, which I think is very instrumental at a time like this to understand the Black experience and to be able to educate ourselves on what it is that Black people want, not what we think they want. And so my first book is actually Black Power. I referenced this one a couple of times. This was written by Kwame Ture and Charles D. Hamilton. It sort of helps out with understanding like the meaning of Black liberation and the basis of what coalitions with Black folks should look like. People have to understand that Black folks may not have the same goals as white folks just because of the economic disparities. So we have to accept that. Sometimes our goals may not align with theirs, and that's okay because they need to be able to advocate those positions to be able to help their individual communities. So this is a good book for that one. And How We Get Free is basically a collection of women from the Combahee River Collective, which is basically a collection of Black feminists from the 1970s, which is it's very informative on the liberation of Black women as a whole, which I think is very important in times like this. And this is Ijeoma Oluo's book, So Do You Want to Talk About Race? This book we actually read in Kate Carson's class. It was fantastic. She has each chapter is dedicated to sort of dissecting these often asked questions about race. And she has a really good chapter when it comes to police brutality. So if you want to even just take a look at her chapter on police brutality, it will just even give you a better understanding of why Black folks have been historically having a struggle when it comes to social justice in their community with the justice system. Now, this one has been on Facebook a lot. I'll tell you that now, but this is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. This is actually written by a white woman, but it is one of those books where she's basically like, if race is such a hard issue for white people to tackle, she sort of white-splains it to other folks to sort of gain a better understanding when it comes to other white folks and a better understanding when it comes to educating them on racism, if that makes sense. So this one's been all over Facebook and all over social media, so I highly recommend that. And then lastly, we have The New Jim Crow, which is basically by Michelle Alexander, and it's a big history lesson on how mass incarceration has become a new form of the justice system being able to oppress Black folks. So it goes through the history of the justice system when it comes to Black folks and what the justice system looks like now and how mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, all functions in this towards Black folks. And yes, those are my 6 books that I offered up for recommendation. So
Excellent. Thank you, Kieron. And also, one thing that we will do is that we will post those books again with links to where to find them on Amazon and so. And so, be looking for that link after we put out this Bridgecast with all those books to catch up on as well. I will be picking up some of those books as well, reading them, and I think that you all should as well. Knowledge is one of the best things that we can do to engage right now. Before we go forward with the final question, I want to have a quick pause to have a shameless plug about the medic training that's going to be happening on Sunday. Bridge Builders and a couple of other organizations are collaborating to offer a medic training that is a baseline 2-hour course, a crash course through how best to stabilize individuals in life-threatening situations. There have been a couple of requests coming from our community and ways of how to look best, to look for heat stroke, to help sort of recognize the dangers of tear gas and how you can sort of protect yourself in the best way from that and minimize the pain, and also look for different trauma injuries or different wounds that can come from that. All that is going to be covered in the medic class of Blackburn Park at 2 p.m. on this Sunday. It's going to be completely free and open to anyone who wants to come and engage with that as well. So another quick shameless plug for that. My final question to you, Kieron, I want to again thank you so much for coming on. The information that you've given us is so important right now for our community. And one of the last things that I think is wonderful about Bridgecast is to sort of offer an opportunity for you to speak whenever you would like to speak on. So is there anything that you would like to share with our Bridge Builders community?
I just think it is important to know that no system is perfect, and there's always going to be inherent flaws that we need to tackle. The current justice system, obviously has a lot of certain flaws, especially regarding the treatment of Black and brown folks. So I think what I would like to say is it is so important for non-Black folks to be a segue of information, to know sites to donate to spread that information to other folks, and to be active in supporting what Black people would like to see occur. And I think that is the one takeaway I would like for folks to be able to take away from this Bridgecast.
Thank you, Kieron. And thank you again for those who are watching. I see lots of individuals watching, and also Dennis, thank you for your comment. I do really agree that Kate Parson is the GOAT. And check back on one of our Bridgecasts where we have Kate Parsons. We mention her a lot, and she's one of the founding members of this organization. And with her, with Kieron, some really great minds doing some really great work within our St. Louis community and beyond. So thank you again to everyone for watching. Thank you to Kieron. And we will see you all next week with Dr. Of course, thank you. And Dr. Paul Moriarty, who will be leading the exchange program, will be our guest next week. So join us then. Thank you.